This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, good. So we are being recorded. And once again, a thank you to Kathy. Today's topic is actually going to be first of a 4-part series, which is going to be spanning. Hello, Julian. Good to see you. And good
Hi,
to see
Rabbi.
you, Roger and Steve. Good. It's going to be part of a 4-part series. We're going to go from heaven to hell and then back. We're going to deal with reincarnation, Gilgul, how Judaism views that. And lastly, we're going to deal with resurrection, right, which is the focus of the second blessing of our Amida, which gives us a sense of just the primary role that it plays in our view, in our understanding, in our religion. And that actually is the ultimate Olam Haba, but we will get there. Okay, so there's a lot to cover over here. So let me share my screen. Sorry, 1 second. There we go. All right, is that visible? Okay, good. So keep in mind, everybody, oops, sorry, let me get to the beginning. Keep in mind that once I'm sharing my screen, I no longer see everybody. I see a bunch of you, I don't see all of you. So if somebody wants to speak up and you're raising a finger and I'm not acknowledging it, realize that I don't see you. So simply unmute yourself and start to speak. Okay, good. So heaven, the world to come. So right off the bat, we wonder, well, why doesn't the Torah speak about this? Why doesn't the Torah mention it? And we're going to see some allusions that we find in the Torah, in the written Torah, much more clearly depicted in the Oral Torah. And by the time we finish, we'll come around to an understanding of why the Torah did not emphasize that, did not go into detail about that. Okay, so the very first pasuk, I'm not going in order. I'm going to start with Devarim, Deuteronomy, and then double back to Bereshit. But in Devarim, we have a very fascinating pasuk. And it reads, Banim atem, source number 1, Banim atem l'Hashem Elokechem. You are the children of Hashem, your God. Lo titgodedu, do not gash or gouge yourselves. Below tasimu karcha bein einechem, nor should you pull out any of your hair. Those who are still blessed to have hair on their heads, do not pull out any of your hair, because I'll mate, lemate. And you'll be doing that over, everybody can just mute just 1 second. You'll be doing that in order to show your agony over the death of someone close to you. So the Torah says you're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to have such expressions of rage, of grief, of anguish. Why not? It simply says, because Banim atem l'Hashem Elokechem, because you are the children of God. And there are a number of different explanations that are given. What is the connection between being the children of God and therefore not to gouge yourselves? I'm going to share some of them with you. I'll share the one that means the most to me. And I'm not saying that this is an explanation of the pasuk. So I'm not saying that this is where the Torah is not saying this, but the Torah is clearly linking your reaction to death needs to be aligned with the understanding that you are children of Hashem, your God. So some explain, you're the children of Hashem, your God. We are, so to speak, created in the image of God, and therefore don't desecrate that image of God by gouging, gashing oneself. Others explain that the same way, imagine if a person would lose a dear friend and then be absolutely inconsolable. Life isn't worth living. How can I go on? How would the spouse feel about such a reaction? Right? A person loses a dear friend and tells their spouse, I have nothing left to live for. Life is worthless. Life is meaningless. And the spouse says, I hope there's something left in the world of value to you. So some explain that's what it's saying. Don't go overboard. You're the children of Hashem. You still have Hashem. And therefore, keep everything else in perspective. And the Oral Torah, which is my favorite explanation on this, and we've mentioned this in some of the other classes not too long ago, the Oral Torah explains this with a parable. And the parable is of a king who sent away his dear son, dear child, because around the king, in the king's province, this person would never fully develop into the human being that he could. He'd always be in the shadow, leaning on his father, the king. And therefore the king sent him away to a faraway land. And there this person developed and built relationships. And finally the king says, time to come back home. And all those who were so dear and close to this person go to the port and bid farewell. And they're sad and they're crying. But no one would consider gouging themselves. And the reason no one would consider gouging themselves is because the child is going back to the parent. So they will miss this person terribly. But the child is returning home to the parent. And therefore sadness, tears are all appropriate. Gouging oneself, pulling out one's hair is inappropriate. Bonim atem laHashem Elokechem. You are the children of Hashem. The child is returning back to his or her maker, to his or her creator. And therefore, we sad, we cry, grief, but not agony, not this gouging, gashing of oneself. That is inappropriate. And that, in a nutshell, is how we view life and death. And the halachic compendium, which deals with all the laws of passing from this world, is titled Gesher HaChaim. Gesher HaChaim means the bridge of life. But isn't it fascinating? The Hebrew word for life, Chaim, is in the plural. Chai is alive. Chaim is life. Why is the Hebrew word for life in the plural? Because there are different stages of life that we have. We have our life in this world. We have our life in the world to come, or the world that comes. We'll see different, better ways of defining it. But the world, the life that we live here is one facet, one aspect of Chaim, of the many stages of life. And let's go right into the Torah, right in the very beginning, in Bereshit and Genesis, where we speak about a person dying. And it's fascinating when you hear how the Torah describes it. We have psukim both by Avraham and by Yitzchak that are quoted over here. Vayigva, source number 2, Vayigva, and Avraham expired, we'll say. Vayamat Avraham b'seva tova, and he died at a good age. Zakein v'saveh, old, mature, content. Vayasef el amav. Let's look at those words. He was gathered to his people. What does that mean, he was gathered to his people? Oh, you might say he was buried. And when a person is buried, that person is gathered to his people, to those who have left already. Except the problem is the very next word is Vayikbaru oto Yitzchak Mishmael Banav. It then says that Yitzchak, Isaac, and Yishmael, his sons, buried him. Therefore, when he was gathered to his people, that does not mean burial. So what does that mean? Similarly, the next verse, still source number 2. Vayime Yitzchak, and the years of the days of Yitzchak, the life of Yitzchak was 180 years. Vayigva Yitzchak vayamat. Once again, Yitzchak expired. He died. Vayasef el amav, and he was gathered to his people. Zakein usvayamim, mature, old, full in years, gathered to his people. Once again, Vayikpuru oto Esav Yaakov banav, and his sons Esav and Yaakov buried him. So gathered to his people, what is the Torah talking about? If the Torah understood death to be the end, that is the end of that person's existence, then what is this being gathered to his people? And the Toldot Yitzchak, source number 3, explains, Vayasef el amav, he was gathered to his people, hu al hanefesh. This is referring to the soul, the spiritual self. Sheneasaf in neshamot, nefashot, that's gathered together with the souls of krovav, of those close relatives. Hatzadikim, righteous. Shekashan kanefesh baguf, when the soul is in the body, he nifredet, it is separated. Mishar nefashot, shehem b'liguf, from those other souls that no longer have a body. Ukishenifreda min aguf, but once the soul leaves the body, nitchabra, it joins imshar nefashot with those other souls. Shehem nifradot min aguf kamohu, that they too have already finished their earthly mission, and those souls have left the body. And actually, there's a book by a Dr. Moody titled Life After Life. And Dr. Moody, written many years ago, Dr. Moody was not Jewish, not religious person, but a doctor who dealt with so many cases of people as they were transitioning, as they were dying. And he himself did not believe in an afterlife, but he recounts there how similar the different experiences that were shared by the people who were clinically dead and then were resuscitated, those who came back to life, and those who, not all do, but those who recount what they experienced. And many of them recounted an experience that they knew, besides the bright light and all that they were all drawn to. But they knew exactly when they were clinically dead. They knew exactly who walked into the room, who said what, who did what. And this all happened while they were dead. And this all fits into our understanding that there are two parts to this. There are two parts the person's created. There's a physical self and a spiritual self, the neshama. And the neshama is exactly who we are, what we are. All of our thoughts, all of our passions, all of our loves, all of our dislikes, all of our accomplishments, all of our stumblings, exactly who we are. Meaning, if a person would become completely immobilized, the body cannot move at all, but still have the same thoughts, we're still that person. We are not the body, we are that soul, and that soul then reunites. So that soul is exactly who we are. And that soul then, Vayasef el amav, the Torah speaks about. It's gathered, it joins its people. It's interesting, there are those who took issue with this Dr. Moody's book and said, the big light, going through the tunnel and going to the light, That's the person's earliest memories that are activated at that point of going through the birth canal and then coming out into the world. That's what the person's memory, the earliest memories are being jogged at that person when the person is dying. The only issue with that explanation is that these experiences were shared equally by those who were born through natural birth and those who were born through a cesarean section. And there was no tunnel. There was just a sudden bright light, I would imagine. Okay, so so those are the psukim in the Torah. This is what Kohelet, Shlomo Melech, King Solomon speaks about in Kohelet when he says, "Vayashav ha'afar el ha'aretz kishahaya," the dust, the physicality returns to the earth as it was. And we always speak about at a funeral, we are returning the body to the earth in order to release the soul. And afterwards, v'tashuv ruach, and the spiritual then tashuv el elokim asher nitana. Then that is returned to God who had given it. And that is our view on death. Death is this coupling that took place during a person's life of their physical being and their spiritual being. That then is separated. The body goes back to its source and the soul returns to its source. In Vayikra, Leviticus, it says, Ushmartem et chukotai, right? You shall observe my ordinances and mishpatai and my judgments, asher yaseh otam adam, that a person will do them, v'chai bahem, and he will live by them. Ani Hashem, I am Hashem. Now, in a very basic halachic level, we learn out that that's why we know that if someone is ill and there's any question of a life issue, the person is rushed to the hospital, even on Shabbat. V'chai bahem. The mitzvah were given to us for us to live by them, not to die by them, except for three exceptions: murder, adultery, idolatry. But normally, life overrides the mitzvot. The Sifra takes it on a different level also, and says, "V'chai bahem," and you will live by these mitzvot. What does that mean? La'olam haba. That means in the world to come. V'im tomar, if you were to ask, maybe it means ba'olam hazeh, in this world. One problem, right? Taxes and death, right? No one escapes that. Valo sofo metu. In the end, everyone dies. So what does it mean, v'chai behem? So how do we live with them? Lo'olam haba. In the world to come, the world that comes. When I'm asked for an elevator pitch definition of what a mitzvah is a physical act that we do in this physical world with our physical body, but we're touching something that is eternal. We're touching that which is spiritual. So with our physical body in a physical world, we're touching that which is eternal, that which is godly. And we thereby gain that eternity. That is v'chai bahem. The mitzvah is a means of connecting to the spiritual, connecting to God. And once we have that connection to God, that is what gives us our eternity, because God is eternal. In Pirkei Avot, Ethics of the Fathers, there the Mishnah says, very famously, Rabbi Yaakov taught, Ha'olam hazeh doma leprosdor. This world is similar to a prose door, to a lobby or an anteroom, to a room that you pass through in order to get to the place, b'fnei olam haba, leading into the world to come. Hatkein atzmacha b'prosdor kadesh tikanes l'traklin. Prepare yourself in this lobby so that you may enter the banquet hall. That is what this world is meant to be. It's meant to be a place of preparation where we ready ourselves, elevate ourselves just a couple of days ago, yes, I was visiting somebody, and someone said to me, Rabbi, as we get older, we get wiser, we get deeper, we become richer in our experiences and our understandings, and we're just getting better and better and deeper and greater, and then we die, right? It seems ridiculous. And I said, yes, but from a Jewish point of view, life is an opportunity to get deeper and better and richer in terms of who we are as human beings, who we are as servants of God, who we are as family members, community members. It's meant for us to get better and better and deeper and a greater understanding and greater experiences. And then we're ready to move on to cross that Gesher HaChayim, to cross that bridge of life to the next stage. So this world is like a lobby. Prepare yourself in the pros door, in this area, Kadesha Tikanes Litraklin, in order that you will be that you may enter into this banquet hall. That is how we view this world, as that earlier stage. And the Mishnah says in Peah, and this is a Mishnah that is said as part of our daily prayers in the morning when we make the blessing over Torah study, which then works for the entire day. Even if we make some interruptions, it works for the entire day. And right after making those blessings, we actually study some Torah and we say a Mishnah. And one of the things we say is this Mishnah in Peah. Peah is the corner of a field that must be left standing grain. When I'm harvesting my field, I leave that for the poor. And we say there, these are the things that a person eats, the fruits in this world. But the principle that awaits for a person in the world to come. And what's on this list? Kibbud Aveim, honoring parents, Gmil Chasadim, acts of kindness, Hava'at Shalom Ben Adam L'Chavero, bringing peace between two different people who might be somewhat at odds with one another. The Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam, and the study of Torah that is equal to all of them. So this world is clearly, according as we see from these, as is alluded to in the Psukim, and as is spoken clearly by our sages in the Torah Shebaal Peh, this world is a world of preparation for us to enter into the next world. Famous story about the Chafetz Chaim that was also just brought up in one of the classes recently. I can never remember which class it was, but it was brought up somewhat recently. A person was traveling through Poland and stopped by the town of Radin, which is where the Chafetz Chaim lived. And once he's there in Radin, he wanted to visit the great sage of the generation, the Chafetz Chaim. So he went to visit the Chafetz Chaim in the Chafetz Chaim's house. And he knocked on his door and he was welcomed in. And he looked around in shock and said, "Where is your furniture?" This is a very, very well-to-do person. He could not believe that this leader of Torah Jewry, of world Torah Jewry, was living in such a sparsely furnished a small home. He said, "Where's your furniture?" Chafetz Chaim turned to him and said, "Where is your furniture?" And he said, "Where's my furniture? I'm just traveling through." And the Chafetz Chaim simply nodded, "Yes, I'm also traveling through." And therefore that determines the emphasis and the priorities that a person has. Very interesting to note, which also I think a very important lesson. What I've read was the Chafetz Chaim's wife passed away and he remarried. And the next house, or the house that he then had with his second wife, was a lot more furnished than the first one. And when he was asked about it, he explained, her needs are greater than mine and my first wife's needs were. So as strong and as strict and as focused as he was, nevertheless, when it came to there being shalom bayit and making sure that his spouse felt comfortable and happy, that was an overriding principle. So these are allusions, some of the allusions of the world to come from the written Torah and the oral Torah. Fair enough. However, what is this world to come? What is this world to come? So we're going to lean very heavily on the Ramchal, Rav Moshe Chaim Luzzatto. He is one of the classic Kabbalists of Judaism, but he wrote many very deep Kabbalistic works and also wrote other works that is based on the Kabbalah. Kabbalah means the teachings that we have received, as orally teachings we have received, but he also has Mesilat Yesharim, Path of the Just, which is the classic Musar, ethic sefer. He has Derech Hashem, the way of God. He has Das Tfunos, the knowing heart. Many other works, all translated beautifully into English also, which combines the two. So in his Mamari Karim, he speaks about the two stages. Gmul Ha'olam Haba, Hu shekafim ma'asav she'asa ba'olam hazeh. The reward of the world to come is in accordance to the actions that a person has done in this world. Kain tikava lo madrega b'tova amitit. That will establish the person's level when one is reaching the true good, the eternal good. What is that? Shehi hadveikut bo yitbarach. That is this closeness, this clinging to, that one will have, this attachment in the English, that one will have to God. And that'll be enjoyed for all eternity. And that's also divided into two parts. The world of the souls and the world of the resurrection. Now, many people say, listen, Rabbi, you go on vacation, you have a great time, but after a while, you're itching to get back, for eternity, right? How enjoyable can that be? And that's very true. It's an excellent point they're making, except to understand, as the Ramchal describes elsewhere in more detail, that we are made for the time we spend in this world. We're made in a way that fits this world. And for the time that we spend in the world to come, we're made in a way that fits the world to come. In this world, we've got to be doing. Adam la'amel yulad. If we're not doing, we start to get frustrated. We start to get antsy. We need to be doing. Why? Because this is the world for doing. This is the world of preparation. And therefore, we are wired that we need to feel we are producing. We need to feel we are accomplishing. We need to feel we're making a difference. And I'm doing something. Vacation is great, but now I got to get back to work. I've got to do something. That's who we are. That's how we are wired here. But in the next world, we'll be wired in a very, very different manner. So asking, from our present mindset, how can I enjoy that? That's because we don't have an understanding of the different states that we will be in. But the reward is this connection, this closeness, this attachment that we will have with Hashem. Ramban Nachmanides writes, Ki aschar nefashiyot kiyumam. I'll just go right to the English. The reward of the souls and their existence in the world of the souls is called Gan Eden by our rabbis. After the world of the souls will come the era of the Messiah, which is a part of this world. So when a person dies, meanwhile we go to what's called the Olam HaNefashot, the world of the souls. Ultimately, back down here, meanwhile back at the ranch, back down here, at a certain point the Messiah will come. At the conclusion thereof, of the Messianic times, the great judgment and the resurrection of the dead will occur. This is the period of reward that includes the body and soul. And in a sense, it only is logical right? The soul didn't do it alone. The soul might have wanted to get up this morning for 6:20 minyan, but the body had to get up also. And therefore, right, the soul might have wanted to attend the class, but the body had to join in also. And therefore, the ultimate reward must be when there is this reunion of body and soul. But the body it will be the body, but the way it's compared is just like we have a physical body and a spiritual soul. So then the soul will be that much higher that the body will be like the soul is now, whatever that means. But it means it's a lot more than what it is now, and it's not the same as it is now. This is the world to come, in which the body will become like the soul, and the soul will cleave to the knowledge of God, just as it adhered to it in the Gan Eden of the world of the souls. Now, however, it will be elevated to an even greater degree, and everything will continue to exist forever and ever, right? And we cannot fathom what in the world is forever, right? But once again, we are locked within the realm of time, so we cannot wrap our heads around it. But what's going to happen there? So the Navi Isaiah Yeshayahu speaks about that, and he writes, Ayin lo rata elokim zulatcha yaseh lemachak elo. No eye has seen, but you, God, that which you have for those who wait for you, for those who trust in you. And we say no one has seen it. We take it so far as to say, when Rabbi Akiva, the great sage Rabbi Akiva, who defied the Romans and taught Torah publicly, and was therefore incarcerated and then was tortured to death, the angels started calling out, God, this is the schar, this is the reward for someone. Why were the angels calling out, the Talmud explains? Because ayin lo rata, even the angels don't get to see what is this, or can't fathom what is this reward, what is this connection. That is what is there. The Gemara Brachot says, Margala Bepume de Rav, this is source number 4. A favorite saying of Rav was, Lo la'olam hazeh olam haba. The future world is not like this world. Olam haba, next world, ein bo lo achila v'lo shtia v'lo pirya v'rivya. There is no eating or drinking, one aspect of pleasure that we get. Lo pirya v'rivya, no intimacy, propagation, sexuality, another area of pleasure that we get. V'lo masa v'matan, not business dealings, not accomplishing in that financial world, which gives us pleasure. V'lo kina, v'lo sina, v'lo tacharut. There's no jealousy, hatred, competition. Elet tzadikin yoshvin v'atorteim b'rasheim v'nanim miziv hashchina. But they sit, the righteous sit with the crowns on their heads, so to speak, enjoying the radiance of the divine presence. And this is an important point to keep in mind. When we look at the pleasures that we have in this world, even in this world, the greatest pleasures that we have is in relationships that we have with others. You can't compare the pleasure of a relationship to anything physical, food, drink, even sexuality is only truly a heightened, pleasurable act when it's with someone that we care for deeply, when it's part and parcel of a relationship. We are wired for relationships. Why? Because ultimately the greatest pleasure that we will have is in that connection, is in that relationship that we have with Hashem. As Rav Dessler in Strive for Truth, excellent set from Rav Dessler, a classic and translated beautifully into English, source number 5. Upon entering the state known as the world to come, the righteous person, as we saw above, begins to enjoy the splendor of the Shekhinah. God raises, so to speak, a corner of the curtain, and the tzaddik experiences a little of God's greatness. of his overwhelming, many-faceted love for his creatures, he gets an inkling of the majestic, universal plan which God has for all of his creatures. In other words, get to reflect back on all the events of life, personal, national, worldwide, throughout all history, and see and plumb the depth of how each and every single one of those was a part of the majestic universal plan, and derives unimaginable joy from the realization that his struggle with his Yetzer Hara, the challenges that each of us had in our life, that we had in our previous state, has significantly contributed to the fulfillment of that plan. We'll see the role that each and every one of us played in that master plan. His soul is suffused with unutterable delight. And another thing, the very fact that he's granted such revelation, the very fact that he's privileged to experience so much pleasure must mean he realizes that his past efforts are appreciated. We all know, no matter what age we are, right? Right? Those of you who are still blessed to have parents. But when our parents are proud and appreciate what we have done, that's tops. That is tops. And he realizes that his or her past efforts are appreciated. To know that God, whom one served, is pleased, adds immeasurably to one's satisfaction. The Gemara says, the Gemara in Brachot talks about things that are a little bit of a taste of something else. We say sleep is a taste of death. And we say Shabbat is Me'ain Olam Haba. Actually, one of the Shabbos mirrors that we have in my Yedidus, we have how Shabbos is Me'ain Olam Haba, Me'ain Olam Haba. That Shabbos is this discernible trace of the world to come. We say it's 1/60th. Now, I'm sure many of you notice 1/60th. Oh, we have that when it comes to kashrut. As long as it's less than 1/60th that got mixed in, it's okay. If it's more than 1/60th, you can't eat it. Why? Because more than 1/60th, then you could taste the non-kosher. Less than 1/60th, you can't taste the non-kosher. It becomes negated. So 1/60th is that border area where you can taste, or you could also miss it. And that's what Shabbos is. It can be, another day where I can't do this, I can't do that. Or it could be Me'ain Olam Haba, a taste of the world to come. The Marsha there, the bottom of the last source on this page, the Marsha, number 6. Similarly, observing Shabbat, seizing all physically creative activity and efforts to improve the physical world, not trying to change the world, not altering the world, instills a sense that the true purpose of life is spiritual, and that our involvement with the physical world is not all important. And there are those that say Shabbat is such an important lesson, we need to get it weekly. And what is one of the many weekly lessons that we get from Shabbat? Well, Friday is a day to prepare. You prepare, stop. At that point, whatever's been prepared is good. You have. Whatever you didn't prepare, you can't. And that is, like we saw before in Pirkei Avot, this world is a world of preparation. It's the pros door leading to the banquet hall. And all the preparations that are made beforehand are made. And then there's the point of stop. Right? You're taking the test, put your pencil down. Right? That's it. You had your chance, and now it has passed. And that's what Shabbos teaches us on a weekly basis. But taking that a step further, on Shabbos, we put the phone down, we put the computer down, we power down. And who do we deal with? We deal with family, we deal with community, we deal with close friends. We deepen our connection with those that are most important. Shabbos is all about relationships, connecting. And Olam Haba is the place of that ultimate connection to our Father in heaven. Right? Those who have lost someone in their life, what they would give for the chance to reconnect for a period of time. Those who have lost parents or a spouse or children or siblings, what we would give for a chance to spend some time with that person. What we don't recognize is the greatest loss that we all feel in our soul, if not in our bodies, is that loss of connection with Hashem. And Olam Haba is being reunited. First of all, as we saw the Gesher Chaim, we're gathered to our El Amav, to our people. We are reunited with those who have left the world already, but even more overwhelmingly, as we see from these sources, we are reunited with Hashem. So the Torah doesn't describe it. How can we describe it? Our language is limited to words that describe events, experiences, things that exist in this world. We don't have words for things that we don't experience. And in Dr. Moody's book, when they're talking about the light, they say it's the only word we can use for it is light, because the closest thing we have to it in this world is a light. But the brightness and the purity of that which we were drawn to so much eclipses anything that we have in this world. We say, Or Zarua Latzadik, the true light that is planted, put away for those who are righteous. So how can we describe it? Oh, it's an amazing cookie. I mean, it's got every imaginable chocolate chip in there. And it's just it's just as chewy as you could ever want to. We can't describe it. Other religions talk about 70 virgins. You always wonder what the virgins do wrong. But whatever the case is, right? We can't take this world and superimpose it and say, oh, it's like that plus, because there is no way to describe it. It is a spiritual delight. But I would say that we know the joy, the deep, resonant pleasure that we gain from relationships. We are wired for relationships, and that is the ultimate connection, the ultimate relationship that we experience. Lastly, the purpose of the world to come. And we're going to bring 3 different paragraphs, once again from the Ramchal, Rav Moshe Chaim Lutzato, 2 from Derech Hashem, and 1 from the Mesilat Yesharim. And again, Path of the Just, Derech Hashem is the way of God. They are all translated into English beautifully, excellently, and a wonderful thing to I don't want to say to read, I rather say to study. Ramchal Derech Hashem. God's purpose in creation, meaning our understanding of God's purpose in creation was to bestow of his good to another, to share himself, so to speak, with others. His wisdom therefore decreed that the nature of this true benefaction be his giving created things the opportunity to attach themselves to him to the greatest degree possible for them. God's wisdom ever decreed that for such good to be perfect, the one enjoying it must be its master. That is, he must earn it for himself. Let's unpack this a little bit. God wanted to bestow good. What is the epitome of good? God. So what does God want to bestow or give the opportunity to connect to? To himself. Great. So put me right into Olam Haba and let me connect. Why go through all of the joys and the trials and tribulations of this world? Because for such good to be perfect, the one enjoying it must be its master. It's not a freebie. It must be something that I have earned, that I have created. I like to tell the story. When I was living in Israel, I used to go to Machane Yehuda, the fruit and vegetable shuk in Jerusalem, on a Thursday night to buy stuff for Shabbos. Why? Because by Thursday night, they wanted to get rid of all of their produce. Because Friday morning is when most people are coming to shop for Shabbos, and they need room for all the fresh, the stuff that's coming in Friday morning. So by Thursday night, I was living on a limited budget when I was living in Israel. By Thursday night, the prices had dropped and just kept dropping and dropping and dropping. And I had experience. I was at a certain stall there. I was buying tomatoes, and tomatoes started off agvania, chamesh, kilo b'chamesh, 5 shekel for a kilo. And then it went down to, kept going down. By the time he was finished, it was 5 kilo for a shekel. Not 5 shekel for 1 kilogram, but 5 kilograms, 10 pounds for 1 shekel. And I'm loading up on tomatoes. Then the guy said one word and I walked away. Bichinam, tikach. It's free. Take whatever you want. At that point, I put down my bag and I walked away. There are poor people who need, if he's giving it out for free. I didn't want to take it for free. If it's a good deal, I was there. It's free? Thanks. I'm okay. There are people who have no money to give at all. They'll take it. I'm out. In order to truly enjoy something, we need to feel that we have earned it. Again, Ramchal number 2 in Derech Hashem. So the purpose of the world to come, let me just preface number 2 by saying, the purpose of the world to come is actually the purpose of creation. That's how we understand the purpose of creation, which is God giving creatures, the ability to connect to God himself. That's the purpose. The purpose of the world to come is the purpose of creation. And we are now, every single one of us, we should all live and be healthy and well for many, 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 many more years of preparation time. Because that's what this is. Number 2, the Ramchal writes, God's goodness decreed that there be a limit to man's effort required to attain perfection. After his period of effort is completed, which is when the soul leaves the body, he attains his level of perfection, whatever level one attained in their lifetime. He is then allowed to enjoy it for all eternity. Therefore, God created 2 distinct periods. One is a time of earning, and the other is a time of receiving reward. However, we always say the midah tova is maruba. The trait of goodness is much greater. And therefore, the time of earning is fixed, 120 years, according to God's will, while the time of receiving reward has no end, is eternal. Rather, a person will derive pleasure forever, eternally, from the perfection that he or she has achieved. Lastly, Ramchal in Mesilat Yesharim, in the Path of the Just, chapter 1, where he speaks about the introduction. Mesilat Yesharim goes through the different stages that a person can ascend in their life. Chazal, our sages of blessed memory, have instructed us that man was created for the sole purpose of reveling in the eternal and delighting in the splendor of the divine presence. That is the purpose of creation. This being the ultimate joy and greatest of all pleasures in existence. The true place for this pleasure is in the world to come, which was created solely for this purpose. However, Haderech Kedei Lahagia El Mechoz Chavtzeinu, the path that allows us to reach this endpoint, this goal, Hu Olam, is this world. That is what our sages meant when they said that this world is like the prose door, the antechamber to the world to come, what we quoted before. This means the means that lead to this goal are the mitzvot that God commanded us to observe, because the mitzvot are the means through which we connect to God in this world, that we touch that which is the eternal, the spiritual. And the place for doing the mitzvot is in this world alone. Therefore, man was first placed in this world to use the methods available to reach the intended destination, the world to come. There he will enjoy the good which he acquired by virtue of these means. That is what our sages meant when they said, Hayom la'asotam umachar l'kabel sicharam. Today, to do them, tomorrow is to receive their reward. I'll just end before I open it up for anyone wants to add anything. I'll end up with a little story that I read. Beautiful little story. A very wealthy man, not known for his piety or philanthropy, stood in a long line of those waiting to have their lives assessed by the heavenly court. He listened attentively as those who were being judged before him recounted both their spiritual achievements and failings. A number of them seemed to have the scales weighted against them until they suddenly remembered acts of charity, of generosity, kindness they had done, which managed to tip the scales in their favor. The rich man took it all in and smiled to himself. When it was his turn, he confidently said, I may have committed some sins during my lifetime, but I now realize what has the power to override them. I'll be very happy to write out a very large check to whatever charity you recommend. To which the court replied, sorry, no checks over here, only receipts. Only receipts. So that's what we are meant to be doing during our lifetime here in order to ascend and reach the Olam Haba. And we'll see in the following weeks, the Olam Haba, right? We say the world to come. It's actually Olam Haba, the world that comes. What do we mean the world that comes? The world that comes from our actions, from the things that we do. It is the world that comes. So the Jewish view of Olam Haba next week we'll go to hell. We'll get to that, sorry. All right, next week we'll deal with that, right? But right now, right, Olam Haba, heaven is a spiritual state where our neshama gets to connect to God, which is the very purpose of creation. And as we saw in the Ramban also, and that is actually an in-between stage until the ultimate point of the fourth in our series, the resurrection, where body and soul are reunited in a recreated state. The body needs to decompose and then can be rebuilt in this heightened state, and their body and soul are reunited. But the Olam Haba, which we can't describe no matter how big a cookie we want to talk about, is the spiritual delight of connecting to God based upon the connections to the spiritual, to the holy, to the good, to the generous that we did during our lifetime here in the prose door, here in the anteroom that leads its way to Olam haba, to the world to come. What role does Gehenna, does hell play in all of this? That's next week.
Rabbi?
Yes.
Hi. I just had a real quick question. What is the significance of the number 60, since it seems to be a reoccurring theme?
Yeah. So 60, hi, I see Kasaya. Hi, Kasaya. Nice to see you. Good. So 60
Hi.
is that in-between state where a person can experience or doesn't. It's kind of, right, it's that borderline. If I work on it, right, less than 1/60th of milk in the chicken pot, in the chicken soup, you don't taste it. More than 1/60th, you do taste. 1/60th is that boundary. So when we speak about Shabbos being 1/60th of the world to come, the idea there is that we can sense it or we can miss it. And it all depends on the Shabbat that we create, that we involve ourselves in. Yes, Cheryl.
Thank you.
People are born with certain maybe God-given attributes that are physical. Maybe you can play an instrument or sing or create, which is also something we haven't addressed about a lot. And I think, like, even just as important as eating and other pleasures that we get in life is to something that we work toward and perfect. What significance does that have at all in the world to come, or is it over with after this life?
Interesting. Certainly, I would say that the different abilities, talents, leanings that we have, tendencies that we have, are the tools that we need in order to fully utilize the time granted to us over here, right? How that carries through into the world to come, I'm not sure, but I would imagine that that's a part of us, and it is us that carries through into the world to come. So exactly what role that plays, clueless. But certainly that is part of who and what we are, and who and what we are with our physical self, our midot, our tendencies, those that we need to strengthen, those that we need to overcome, our talents, our challenges. All of that is the exact menu that went into producing who we are, with the role that we are meant to play and the accomplishments that we are meant to accomplish.
So perhaps it would have the role of bringing joy in the next world, in seeing the joy that hopefully that we gave to others through our talents. Or
That's for sure, right? That we actually saw in one of the texts that we studied, where Dessler spoke about knowing that, seeing the good that we did and appreciating that, right? Right? Will I get to play guitar for God? I don't know. The way I play guitar, he probably doesn't want to hear it, right? But how will these talents be expressed in the world to come? That I have no idea. But certainly if we use our talents in a positive way here, then they become spiritual acts. And therefore they become eternal. Yeah. Okay, my friends. Anybody else? Good seeing you. Julian, great having you join in. Great having you here, Julian.
Nice to be here. Good to see you.
Okay, good seeing. Oh, there's Steve. Good. Okay, and Ken is here. Good. Everyone else I acknowledged already, I believe, whose cameras are open. Good. Okay, good seeing you, Rosa and Rose. Everybody, thank you for joining us. And
Thank you.
Saturday night, Havdalah 6:10. I'm doing a musical Havdalah for those who want to join us. We do that each week. It'll be 6:10. And yeah, and we will continue next week with going a little further down into these topics. No pun intended. Okay, everybody.
So much.
Okay, be well.
Thank you.
Very much.
You're very welcome.
Thanks.